So millennial isn't a stage of life, and millennial isn't a derogatory term. I think it's really important that we, especially as older millennials, realize that it's something that we should use to our advantage. So there are actually two different types of millennials that people have no idea even exist. Hey guys, I'm Gabrielle Boucher with the Millennial Solution, and this is your Millennial Minute. Now, you may not realize that the millennial generation is the largest generation that has ever existed. There are 83 million millennials in the United States. Now, as someone who has founded a research firm, does consulting and strategy for Fortune 500s and major companies when it comes to how do you attract, retain, and engage millennial talent, I hear from folks all the time saying, this millennial thing is over. We've heard about it, we've seen presentations, talks, we're on to the next generation, right? Let's talk about Generation Z as if maybe they're somehow better or less annoying than the millennial generation. And although I can understand some fatigue, the challenge is that many folks have brought in experts like myself to talk about millennials, but that habit change hasn't actually happened. They're still complaining that millennials are unmotivated. They're still seeing high turnover amongst young generation employees. And frankly, there's still a mismatch between expectations of new generation employees and the leaders currently leading our industry. So my question for leaders like you is, are you done talking about it? Or are you done doing something about it? So I want to share with you a mindset shift that's going to be really helpful for you to realize that the next generation is not over, that we have a massive challenge and a massive opportunity for when it comes to reaching the next generation. Now, millennials are born between 1982 and 2000. So we've got this massive generation, biggest generation that ever existed. What we've started to find is that it's such a big generation that sociologists are starting to divide it up into two main parts of the generation. So we've got millennial group A and millennial group B. Now, millennial group A is the part that I'm a part of. We're known as the elder millennials, or at least that's what I like to consider myself. And they're anyone born between 1982 and 1990. So they're that older part of the generation. They're in their upper 20s and definitely in their 30s, where they're realizing, that they want to have a great job, they want to have a great career. Maybe they're starting to get married, because millennials do get married and we do buy houses. The average is about 7 years longer than other generations, so keep that in mind, especially if you're in retail or real estate. It's just taking longer. And so this older part of the generation is starting to act more like their Generation X counterparts, simply because the stage of life that they're in. The key difference is how they want information. So because we were raised in the dot-com bubble phase, where everything was done for and through technology, there's an expectation that there's going to be more of a tech component of it. So whether that's an app for how they're buying a phone, buying a car, or there's an app for how they're communicating with their boss. Whatever that is, there tends to be, with that older part of the generation, an expectation that technology is going to be part of the solution to whatever challenge that they are experiencing. And so I'm seeing with that older part of the generation, many of us don't even consider ourselves millennials. If you're watching and you're part of millennial group A, you know what I'm talking about. I get messages from you guys all the time saying, oh my gosh, I'm born in 1982 or 1983. I didn't know I was millennial. And sometimes they're excited, and sometimes they're a little depressed. And the truth is that this generation really has gotten such a bad rap. And so many of the older millennials, maybe they're 36, 37, are saying, well, I'm not part of that generation because I have a job, right? And I've got a kid, and I'm responsible. Like, I have a savings account, I invest, right? So millennial isn't a stage of life, and millennial isn't a derogatory term. I think it's really important that we, especially as older millennials, realize that it's something that we should use to our advantage rather than see something that's dirty. So that's my big initiative, is helping redeem that generational identity, because I think there's something really powerful that can happen when we start to realize that we are a generation, and as a generation we can do incredible things. The second part of the generation are millennial group B. So they're born between 1991 and 2000. So they're the younger generation, and that's typically what most people think of when they think of millennials. They think of emerging talent, right? They think of college students. I can't tell you how frustrating it is as an older millennial to be treated like a college student. On one side, it's great, right? I don't mind people asking me if I'm a student or where I go to school, right? I'm like, keep it coming, because one day you're gonna stop asking me that and then I'm gonna be worried. But for the most part, this younger part of the generation is what most people think of when they think of millennials. They think of Snapchatting, tweeting, selfie stick carrying generation. I don't think anyone carries selfie sticks anymore, especially younger millennials, but you know what I mean, selfie taking young people who are entitled, have ridiculous expectations, and are totally out of touch with reality. When of course there are those ridiculous stereotypes in every generation, for the most part what we're seeing with that younger part of the generation, so kind of 25, 26 and younger, is that they are really hardworking. They're starting to wise up to the fact that it's not just an education that's going to guarantee them a job, like my part of the generation thought. They're realizing that they need to have skills. So really interested in personal development and personal improvement, like TED Talks and podcasts and taking online courses. And so you're seeing a new part of this generation get excited about developing themselves and realizing that they can't expect their boss or their professor or their parent to step in and educate them. They're going to have to take more ownership of it, which I think just took a little bit longer for the older part of my generation to figure out, because we were promised from a really young age that if you go to college, you're going to get a good job, which obviously didn't happen, right? So it's important for you to realize as you're hiring a new generation that we've got a massive generation here that's incredible, that's 18 to 38 years old, that's really an exciting generation to engage with. But we need to realize that we can't treat all millennials like college students, and we can't treat them all like young families. There's so much diversity. Millennials are entrepreneurs and executive assistants and, and students and parents and investors and CEOs. And so because of that, realizing that when we're looking at the next generation, one of the biggest challenges I throw out to leaders all the time is to not project your own experience or expectations on the next generation. Saying, well, it took me 10 years to get to where I am, or it took me 20 years, or when I was their age, this was what I was doing. Whether it's, where you're at with your family or your finances, or even your own personal experience or your possessions. Making sure that we realize we've got a new generation that has a completely different set of experiences and expectations, understanding where they're coming from, meeting them where they're at, and then working together to move forward. So that's it from me. I'm Gabrielle Boucher. That was your Millennial Minute.